The champ is
Hey,
here!
what's
The
up?
champ is here!
Your tired host, robnoerr, here with Ryan Mullally. We're going to discuss the marathon debate last night. As poor as Pisco did, and with although Avi, I think, seems like a very nice guy, and I have some criticism with the moderation, though nothing to really impugn him as a human being or anything. Man, you got to give credit to both of them as well for staying up for, I think it was like 11 hours. So, it's here though. I feel good. I feel good about it. I'm happy to talk about it here today. And thank you, Ryan, for being here as well.
Of course, buddy. Of course. Yeah, they get 1 point for endurance and negative 1,000 points for tyrannical aspirations. So you can do the scoreboard that way, and it checks out. No, you did fantastic, Rob. You did yeoman's work. I'm not sure I would ever want to do an 11-hour debate, much less an 11-hour debate with Pisco. So that's truly an endurance contest. So well done sticking that out. And by the way, and also from what I've seen, absolutely crushing face. I will not claim I watched the whole 11-hour debate, Rob, but.
So first up, I have to give you credit because I think, obviously, it's a weird thing because part of the debate was talking about your debate. That was one of the prompts, right? And so I think that the strategy you employed, or at least the reason behind the strategy, was sort of seminal to my strategy as well, which is the grievance we have here is that Pisco is just a partisan actor who just wants power because he thinks he and his side are good and his opponents are bad. And so they start with that justification and then say, okay, in our attempts to get that power, to convince people to give us that power, we have to make it seem benign. We have to make it seem like it's appealing to principles of neutrality or justice or fairness. But in reality, that's not their intent. They aim to go way beyond it. And so what they do is they're like, oh, no, it's fair, it's justice, whatever. Get lost in this minutia, hyper-focus on details, make it seem like just these little reasonable things, when in reality, their intent is tyrannical change to this government to give themselves authoritarian powers so that they have power perpetually. That's it. And so I hope that I exhibited last night in 11 hours. That was the point that I was trying to illustrate, which I announced. I want the audience at the end of the day to understand that this is a representation of the Democratic Party and exactly what they plan to do. And I think that when he ends the debate, I know we talked about it a little, you didn't see it. Literally, he admits it at the end of the debate. It's just my preferences. Dems should pack the court because I think it's good for them to pack the court, and Democrats are good. That's the truth. And the fact that he's like, of course that's the case at the end of the debate. It took 11 hours to get there, but I'm happy for the admission.
Well, because that's what it is at the end of the day, right? Like, it's a syllogism that's full of these custom proprietary definitions and utterances without actual meaning. But at the end of the day, a valid syllogism doesn't mean very much, Rob. It doesn't mean anything at all. Like, if A, then B, A, therefore B. If Democrats good, then pack court. Democrats good. Conclusion, then pack court. That's not like the fact that you've constructed a symbolically valid syllogism doesn't mean anything. It's, by the way, it's never convinced a voter in the history of mankind.
That's the real point.
It's never convinced a single voter. But B, who cares? Like the thing that was I found so personally vindicating about what you did last night is, imagine you're me. You're like, okay, Pisco's going to debate this bullshit syllogism with his bullshit definitions and his bullshit power grab. But you're on modern day debate and you only have an hour. Can you actually unpick that syllogism with the way he's going to talk about definitions in an hour? No. It took 11. It took 11 fucking hours to get to the end of the rainbow.
Dude, it took fucking 3 hours just to do the portion on your debate.
Yeah.
It was an hour and 45 minutes and we were on premise 1 of his syllogism on your debate with him. Premise 1 in that debate was something to this effect. If Ryan didn't justify his position or undermine the justification for my position, he did bad in the debate, right? Now, the whole Philbro thing, it's so funny to me. I'll make a quick case here. I have some friends that debate sort of Philbro style, right? It's not for me. And I think that it doesn't really translate to practical applications of real world, practical political change. I don't think anyone in their fucking mind is going to be like, listen, are you considering voting for Republicans or Democrats? Yeah, I'm on the fence. Well, here's the deal. Here's why you should vote for Republicans and give them extreme power forever. Because we're going to define Democrats as Satan child attackers. That's our definition. It's a proprietary definition of Satan child. So wouldn't it be a valid syllogism to say we don't like Satan attackers of children? Democrats we define as Satan attackers of children. Therefore, we have to reject Democrats. Like, they're going to be like, what the fuck drugs are you on? Excuse me? Get the fuck out of my way. I don't think that what they're doing with that Phil Bros stuff is in any way, shape, or form interesting to me at all. There are utility in understanding it to be able to push back, but for me, when it comes to practical application of real-world change, I don't think that I have to know formal language and to be able to argue against the soundness versus the validity when I can say, dude, when you could just change definitions of words to whatever you want the entire time, your argument is dog shit, and everyone can see it.
Well,
That's it.
Honestly, beyond feeling personally vindicated, this also vindicates Andrew Wilson's approach to debate, right? Because Andrew Wilson's take for the longest time is, if they're going to be doing this kind of like bullshit, I get to redefine words, this is all just utterances, words are whatever I say they mean, then I'm not going to talk about anything else. I'm just going to expose that that's what they're doing and then say that's nonsense. And by the way, the debate's now over because I don't have to go any further down the rainbow with you, which, like, you can criticize him for doing it. But truthfully, that's why your debate lasted 11 hours, is because it took 11 hours to get Pisco to the point where he would admit, like, I'm just making all this shit up. I'm making it all up. I'm making it all up. At one point, he said, what did he say? He said, deterrence can be satisfied if you put someone on notice.
Correct.
That's deterrence, right? Now, of course, he didn't realize that, like, his syllogism says you can't do it if it overshoots mild deterrence. So you can't court pack if it overshoots mildly putting someone on notice. And then later he's like, oh no, he realized that definition didn't work. So then he started using the normal definition of deterrence. Right? They shift constantly because he's just making it up. He's making it all up.
So the mild deterrence point, it's a great point to get to, right? This is in the second part of the debate about court packing. Like, I'm frustrated because when you announce, and he did this, he announced in his opening statement, actually the definitions of words are irrelevant. They're sort of subjective. So what I'm doing here is saying utterances and then explaining the meaning behind the utterance. So, for example, court pack doesn't mean court pack. Court pack is sounds that come out of your mouth, and now I'll explain what my interpretation of those sounds are, right? So even if I accept that premise trying to go forward, then how do we get to a mutual understanding of what he means by that term in his syllogism, right? One of the easiest ways would be, I will read a definition of court pack, and you tell me if you agree or where you disagree. That would seem to be a tool for utility. Pisco says that's me appealing to a dictionary, which is equivocation. He kept using that word, which, by the way, he doesn't understand the meaning of that word either. He says that's equivocation, and then says he has a different definition of deterrence. Now, the problem is he does this all throughout the debate. He changes the definition of reciprocal. He changes the definition of norms. He changes the definition of partisan injurious. He keeps citing. So this time I'm fed up, and I say, write the fucking definition down. Here is the definition of deterrence that he wrote down and gave me. You ready? If I said, Ryan, define cat, you would probably say something like a four-legged feline. Yeah, well, you would have something like this. It would start off with an affirmative statement, right? You ready? Here we go. Pisco's definition of the word deterrence. Quote, as used in the argument is the concept of inducing in the mind of a set of actors knowledge that would tend in a reasonable person to lower the tendency to partake in a given action, or at least put them on notice of a given consequence. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's like, it's so fucking, the or is what cracks me up the most there.
Because it's this really long sentence, and then there's an or that's so much easier to satisfy. Well, it's kind of like you're like, like, oh, what does it mean to be a bad person? It's like, well, if you sin against the church and you look at the definitions and you go into this deep Christian theological overview of what sin and morality means, and we'll have to go to 18 church seminars, that could make you a bad person. Or if you work on Sundays. Right. You're like, oh, that it seems like the or is doing a lot of work.
Right.
You know, like that. The or seems very easy to satisfy. The first thing seems very complicated.
Now, the reason is, like, all of this is designed, right? It's designed for something very particular, right? And it's designed to make it look reciprocal and make it look just, right? So he had someone reach out to me that wanted one of his Phil Bro buddies that wanted to explain. There was an irony, and there were 2 points in the debate.
By the way, fuck them. You owe those people fucking nothing.
Yeah,
you owe them nothing.
By the way, I have nothing bad to say about Avi as a person. And I think
I like Avi, yeah.
I think probably what happened was Avi's concept of moderating the debate was different than what my concept would be, which is just sort of sitting there and allowing the two people to hash out, not to constantly interject as sort of an authority figure on the formal rules of logic.
That's not Avi. Well, I mean, maybe it's Avi's fault for responding to it, but Pisco kept asking Avi.
Right.
Pisco kept going to the moderator like, Avi, tell him my syllogism's good. Avi, tell him how P1 links up to P2, that sort of thing.
And in a debate, if I was moderator, I'd be like, I'm not debating.
No, I'm not.
But the problem was then I had no choice, and it's regrettable. But I made two decisions with Avi that I thought I had to do. The first was I then started to ask to appeal to him because otherwise, I just had to, and that's regrettable because then it puts him as an authority figure. Like, oh, he's the judge and the moderator, and so what he says goes, and that's a very enviable position for me as Avi being someone that's coached Pisco, I believe. So it's very unenviable for me to have to appeal to him as an authority because I don't view him that way. But in the context of what's going on in the debate, and Pisco keeps saying, the other thing I had to do was I had to basically call Avi out as being in what I thought was bias, which isn't something that I want to do. But I noticed after I called him out, the bias seemed to lessen. And so it's like you have to make a decision at some point to be like, excuse me, I feel like you're weighing in heavily on one side here. And it's neither, both of those things were regrettable, but I made a strategic decision. I wasn't a dick about it. I didn't say, I hate you, Avi, this is bullshit. I just said, come on, man. It looks like you're heavily weighing in on one side of this. It's regrettable.
You have to do that sometimes. Like I sometimes on Wick shows, I'll say like, if Wick's getting a little bit too deep in it, I'll be like, Wick, are you debating or moderating? Right? Because it's just like, if you feel like the role's not being respected, then you kind of need to say something. Otherwise, you just get painted into a corner. And like, for whatever reason, and maybe it's because Avi is like someone who's been teaching, Pisco logic and syllogisms and stuff like that. Pisco kept appealing to Avi to explain things to you, which is a very weird thing to do in a debate with a moderator. That's not what the moderator is for. Avi was doing it. So I think you had, what else were you going to do? You can't sit there and say nothing about it. And it did lead to, like, for those of you who watched, there were many kill shots, but one of the great kill shots in this debate is Pisco's whole argument is that there will not be a severe consequence cascade. It's one of the most vulnerable premises. If there is a consequence cascade, if there is a lack of deterrence, then his argument fails on its face. It's actually two premises. So it's two core premises. And Rob turned to Avi and said, well, Avi, since Pisco's been appealing to you, I'll ask you a question. If the Democrats pack the court, do you think that makes it more or less likely that the Republicans will pack the court down the road? And he said, more likely. It's like, okay, done.
It's the end of the debate.
That's the end of the debate. Your premises are unsound on their face by the authority figure you've been appealing to all debate. So we're done.
And then he has to change the definition of deterrence, right? And then what Pisco's argument was, but providing a short-term increase in incentive in court packing, it will lead to a long-term deterrence, which I have two arguments to. The one, and probably more abstract, was like, but then you could claim everything that's the opposite of deterrence is deterrence, right? For example, let's say that I believe right now that we're not cracking down on thieves enough. We're too lenient on our sentencing, right? I want 20% harsher sentencing on thievery, right? So I say, here's how we will deter thievery. You ready? You ready for this, Ryan? Tell thieves right now for the next 2 years we refuse to prosecute them. You know what'll happen? thievery will increase, which then will lead to people getting pissed, which will lead to them pushing for harder laws on thievery. Therefore, by incentivizing, by saying, we're going to stop prosecuting thievery, I am, quote, deterring thievery. Because I intuit that in the future, that might in fact do that. It is
Rob, that seems like rank speculation and like you're just making up the definition of what deterrence is. Is that it couldn't possibly be the case that you're just rankly speculating and making up a definition with your anti-thievery program, right, Rob? That seems
it's surreal. It was absolutely surreal to hear it going on. And the other part, though, and I'll see if I can pull up this clip. If there's one clip I was going to show, it would be this. There was a point where I was like, if that's true, right? If it's true that if packing the court is a deterrence, right? I said, let's make my own syllogism. 1, packing the court's really bad. Yeah. Second, it is a moral good that we ought to deter court packing. Yes. Third, if Republicans packed the court today, it would deter court packing. He's like, yeah. He's like, conclusion, Republicans should pack the court today. And he's like, well, it's not valid. It's not sound. I said, why? He said, because there's other situations if we set up a truth table. I said, okay, give me an example. He goes, Avi?
Well, because this is the thing, right? Like this is how do I put this right? I'm make sure I can explain this to people who don't move in these circles. Like when you meet a first-year law student, they're insufferable because they go around using legalese all the time. You know, they're like repsa locutor. You know, they'll say things like inter alia, like they want to use like legal Latin. They want to talk about, you know, shifting burdens of proof and, you know, the presumption of innocence, and all, but they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're just using all these terms all the time.
Correct.
Pisco's like a first-year philosophy student where he's like, oh, syllogisms, truth tables. Oh, this is like he's got all this like new tools in his tool belt, but he doesn't understand what their limits are and what they're for. Right? Like nobody's going to be impressed that you have this syllogism. It doesn't move the needle for fucking anybody, especially if you're using proprietary definitions. And the point that you were making, and I think technically the syllogism you came up with on the fly wasn't valid, technically speaking, but that's not the fucking point. The point you're making is anybody can make up a valid syllogism given a little bit of time if they get to make up what all the words mean, right? And the central question with Pisco that you kept articulating really beautifully, I thought, is like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this, Pisco? You're doing this to obfuscate the tyrannical approach that you have. You don't want people to know that you're doing a partisan power grab. You want to cloak it in logic and goodness and fairness, and you're hoping that people are going to be unwilling to pick it apart. And that's all this was. That's all this, and it's all that it could be because Pisco doesn't believe words have meaning. So what are we even talking about here? Like what's the exercise we're going through? So I mean, it was, I thought, wildly exposing for somebody who spent so much time and effort on this PR campaign of his pro-court packing campaign, and this idiotic syllogism that he's been trotting around as if it was going to move the needle, and also as if people don't see what he's up to.
Yeah, it's and I will show that clip here later if I can find it, but to go back to start the actual part of talking about your debate was important because it illustrated something important. I think that I made credible arguments as to why I thought you did good in the debate. Obviously, I don't think you did perfect. I don't think I did perfect last night.
No such thing as perfect debate.
There was an intuition that we were talking about net good or bad. I definitely think you did net good. I definitely think you won the debate. I started off by talking about goals that you could set yourself outside the scope of just winning an individual prompt, right? And I said that I certainly think you did that. You exposed the radical agenda that Pisco had, and that you exposed it in the easiest way. Right? Because you offered to debate the exact prompt he wanted. Well, you were debating the prompt, but the exact plan within the prompt he wanted, if he would disavow the Ro Khanna plan that went beyond reciprocity. And he would not do it. And then your argument was, see, this is his honest opinion, which I want to debate his honest opinion, which, by the way, found within the scope. I made some arguments that I thought there just was an inability to handle. For example, we have hearings in the Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday, correct? Yes, okay. Let's say the topic of that is foreign affairs. But within that, if Democrats were able to successfully get out of Marco Rubio that he and Donald Trump committed a financial crime, wouldn't Democrats say those Democrats did good in the hearing? Even though the topic of the hearing, the agreed about topic, was foreign affairs and nothing to do with all, Pisco and Avi both concede, yes, that's the case. If in a presidential debate, Kamala Harris gets asked a question about foreign policy, and she says, Donald Trump assaulted a woman and Epstein files. And that means that 80% of the people watching think she won the debate. Would Democrats say she did good in the debate? Yes. Pisco hand waves all this away and says, no, the style of debate we do in modern day debate is different. In the hearing, in presidential debates, you could do good while ignoring the topic, but you can't in modern day debate. That's different. And the reason, the argument that he's articulating, which is just nonsensical, and I also argue, by the way, you were arguing the topic, but the argument that he makes is, it doesn't matter if you're arguing the topic. I'll go back to what I said about like formal policy debate in college, right? Here's how it works. You have a broad topic, a broad resolution for the entire year. Then the affirmative takes a plan, and the strategic nature of what the affirmative is doing is trying to have a plan that's as narrowly tailored as possible to fit within the confines of affirming the resolution. The negative then has to argue the affirmative plan. So, for example, in this case, it would be, if this was a collegiate debate, you saying Ro Khanna's plan is shit. If I was the affirmative, I'd say, my plan's not Ro Khanna's plan. You're not responsive to what I'm saying. That's not the style of debate we do here. That's not the style of debate. But that's collegiate debate, right? Pisco's arguing that's the way it should be, though, basically. The focus should be on my plan, not on what my real plan is that I talked about yesterday, only the plan that I'm outlining here. And what's his plan? The syllogism. That's what he wants to talk about, the syllogism, right? And he says, why Ryan's so shitty is this. He saw the syllogism. He knew what I interpreted as the resolution, and yet he didn't engage. And that's what's bad faith. Okay, now, fast forward 3 hours. We get to the second part of the debate. What does the motherfucker do immediately? I'm going to change my syllogism. In his opening statement. And I'm like, you motherfucker, you just had the balls to say. Because I was like, so you now changed the word court packing when you know that that's one of the weakest parts in this syllogism. That you said that what happened to Merrick Garland was court packing. Because if I could prove it wasn't court packing, the premise goes away and you lose. So you know that that's where a large thrust of my attacks. Pete, I talked to you beforehand, Ryan. What did I say? Premise 2, premise 5. Yeah. Now he changes premise 2. I change it. And all of the, and he appeals to Avi, and Avi's like, well, because basically this is why it was allowed to be changed. Because here's the deal, man. After all, court packing's just an utterance. And so what's the important part is articulating the meaning behind the utterance. So even before the debate starts, before you've said one word, Rob, in his opening statement, he is now clarifying what the utterance means. To which my response, in addition to this is fucking insane, is, but why wouldn't he do that before the debate? It would be different in the context of a back and forth for like 20 minutes. He says, wait a minute. Let me clarify the utterance. But instead, he changes the utterance before I've had a chance to speak. Almost like exactly what he accused you of doing. An intentional sandbag. He knew that I knew what he was defining court packing as, and so he changed it at the last minute. That's what they did. And so I don't mind, by the way. Fuck it. I don't care. I'll argue why it's bad within the context. But the idea that I'm going to be like, oh, this dude's not even engaging in the agreed upon. This is sandbagging. This is terribly unethical, blah, blah, blah. No, it's just your shit. But I'm not going to sit here and wax on. But the balls to wax on for a week about how meanie of a person you are because you sandbag, blah, blah, blah. And the motherfucker does it immediately after arguing it for 3 hours.
Well, I've got a bunch of subsidiary points, but I think this is a good time to make the broader point. The reason I said I don't really care, and by the way, I appreciate you going to bat for me, but I don't really care how the first half of that debate went. Not even the first half, the first third, no, quarter. Jesus, 11 hours. The first, about whether I did good. A, I know I did good. I don't really care. But B, nothing could be done to better vindicate my approach to that debate than actually going through the painstaking effort of getting him to admit that he made up all his definitions, that it's all preferences, that it's all bullshit, that the syllogism doesn't mean anything, to go through that exercise the way you did. Nothing could be more vindicating. And the reason is I agreed to debate him in an hour format, right? Now, he set forth this syllogism, and then he has this strategy of defending the syllogism, which everyone who watched did last night, which is to make conversation impossible, to make conversation completely impossible at every turn. That's his main tactic, right? There is nothing on God's green earth you could do to get to the bottom of that syllogism in an hour. It's not possible, not with somebody who's having that approach to conversation, right? Because you guys spent an hour on whether or not, like, you know, on like what the word injury meant, basically. You know what I mean? Like everything took an hour. So you want to talk about like sandbagging and bad faith shit. What's his meta tactic? His meta tactic is, I think court packing is good. Here's my syllogism. Then we have a debate that never gets anywhere because it can't, because there's no way to do this in an hour because I'm going to obfuscate everyone. And people walk away thinking, oh, there's good points on both sides.
That's exactly the point.
Right?
It seems that's why, for example, why did he even put the word court packing? If he's like, it doesn't matter if what happened to Merrick Garland was court packing or not. Why do you think he chose the word court packing though? Because he knows that the average person's like, oh, if one side court packed, the other side gets to court pack. He knows that that's something that most people will default to. So he uses the word court packing. As soon as you get into like, wait a minute, this is a minority definition in the extreme. That's not how we've ever really viewed court packing. He knows that most people will be like, oh, if it's not court packing, you get to do whatever that is back to them, but you don't get to do court packing. That's a step beyond. And so he plays fast and loose with it. When it benefits him, he'll say it's court packing. When you prove that that's a bad definition, therefore the syllogism falls apart, he says it doesn't matter if it's court packing. That's not necessary. And so, like, I agree with you, by the way, that part of me was, I would have fucking debated another 5 hours. No doubt in my mind, because what I was trying to illustrate was just how fucking slimy he was. And to make the point, this is why doing an hour debate with him, you get nowhere. And it's so frustrating because it'll just be like the littlest, like, here's an example of something that happened. At the end of the debate, I'm like, Pisco, basically what you're saying is this. The reason Democrats should pack the court is because, according to your preferences, it's good. And he's like, well, because of a stance-dependent inquiry, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, you know, after all, I'm an anti-realist. I was like, Pisco, I'm a redneck. That means nothing to me. My guess is the majority of the audience doesn't know what the fuck you mean by anti-realist. So I'm trying to clearly articulate in a way that everyone can understand your position. I'll ask you again. It takes like 6 minutes, and then finally he's like, yes, that's another way of saying what I'm saying. Now, why did we have to fight for 6 minutes? Why didn't you just say, that's my position?
And by the way, if that comes up again, I have a conversation on my stream with Lance Bush, who's like, he's the philosopher where all the anti-realists are getting their talking points from. And I asked Lance, because Lance is a very honest guy. I was like, so when you say stance dependent, what you mean is that you have a set of values and preferences, and that's what you base your morality on. And he's like, yeah, and values and preferences reduces to preferences. And he's like, yeah.
That's it. Okay. And when it got down to it, that's what Pisco said.
Because that's the position. It's not like I'm not saying that Lance admitted something like catastrophic. Right. I'm saying like Lance was honest about what the position is. If you're an anti-realist, then it's dependent on your stances, and your stances are dependent on your preferences. So what? Like the entire idea of Pisco appealing to neutrality or fairness, it's completely irrelevant. Yeah.
Right. And the reason we get here is this. Right. There's two different concepts. Right. There's a concept of like tit for tat, of making whole. Something bad happened, and so a reciprocal action is made to sort of even the scales, right? What we don't say is this, a norm was violated because Republicans rejected blue slips. Therefore, Democrats get to add 50 justices. We would say, whoa, that's not even, right? Pisco is intended. But
Rob, I've defined blue slip as court packing.
Right.
So
that's right.
So since I've defined it as court packing, that's reciprocal.
Pisco, what he's doing is he's saying we should literally pack the court with up to 4 seats, right? That's already vastly disproportional, which he admits. He ends up admitting. Also, we should end the filibuster. Also, we should give legislative rules over the court. Also, we should add 2 states. Also, vote blue no matter who. We should do that, right? Also, we should Ignore all of the insurrections that I used to complain about. We should ignore that. All of these things that he's doing. Also, we should keep our opponents off the ballot, right? He's suggesting all of this simultaneously. Now, this is obviously hugely beyond any reasonable, charitable interpretation of equality or fairness, right? It's clear, or justice. It's beyond that. And so it's like, Pisco, if the premise here is that it's about fairness, clearly your worldview must be rejected. He says, no, it's more than that. Because even though we go beyond the scope of proportionality, the reason we're going beyond the scope is because we're good. Because we're good.
And why are we good? Because that's our preference.
So, and one of the things, like, again, because I don't formally debate the Phil Bros shit, like the idea of a syllogism being valid versus should it be something that we accept the conclusion of being two completely different things. Think of this. This is his premise one. He says, if there was injurious partisan Supreme Court packing, he has proprietary definitions for injurious, proprietary definition for partisan, proprietary definition for Supreme Court packing, and there's no effective way to reverse it without court packing. He literally said that if all justices died in a plane wreck tomorrow and we had 9 justices that were Democrats were in charge and appointed them, that still would not be sufficient to reverse the injury. More than every justice being Democrat would be what's necessary, right? Then he says, and the proposed reciprocal, he has a proprietary definition of reciprocal, packing doesn't overshoot beyond mild deterrence. Now that's key, because he's implying it clearly overshoots reciprocity. That's why he's saying overshoot. Why does it matter what your reasoning is? Could I not rewrite the syllogism to say this? And the proposed reciprocal court packing doesn't overshoot beyond 500 justices. Still valid premise.
That's my definition of mild deterrence.
Right? Well, I don't even have to say mild deterrence.
Yeah.
I could literally just say, all that really is, okay, it goes beyond proportionality, but it's for a good reason. My good reason is, I say this, the court packing is good. Forget fairness, forget reciprocity. It's good because I think abortion murders babies. And so therefore we should pack the fucking court to make sure all abortion's illegal. Now, who's to say I'm wrong? If all values are subjective, there's no reason to prefer the value of fairness. There's no reason to prefer the values of pro-choice or anything. All that matters is, to me, I've said my side is good, therefore it justifies me breaking. Why are norms important? Norms are just your subjective value that, for whatever reason, I asked Pisco, I said, why? What is it? Why do you think norms are important? You know, and he said, I don't know, the genetics I was born with, how I was raised, everything. Words are completely subjective. Morality is completely subjective. And it's like, even if you want, it's the equivalent of this. I remember having this argument. I had this friend that was obsessed with this concept when I used to drink with him, that free will doesn't exist. And like, we would have these debates, and eventually I'd be like, I don't care, because even if you're right, then it's all irrelevant. So I just don't care. You could reductive everything. Rob, did you really just make the choice to grab for that Coors Light? Or do you just have the illusion that you reached for the Coors Light? I don't care. That's the answer. It's the same with this shit. If you're going to make it so reductive, that's like, basically you're just saying might makes right. Whatever the fuck I feel is good, fuck you.
Well, I mean, how about this? This is the thing about logical validity. Logical validity just means the symbols are in the right place. You know, if A, then B, therefore A, conclusion B. If you know a man named Pisco, then he is in possession of violent and terrible child exploitative materials. I know a guy named Pisco. Conclusion, he is currently in possession of violent and terrible child exploitative materials. That is a valid syllogism. It's valid because the symbols are in the right place. That's all valid means. The symbols are in the right place. Now, you might ask me, how are you defining child exploitative materials? And I say, that's the thing. I have a proprietary definition for child exploitative materials. I actually mean comic books. Now, you might say, isn't it a little bit weird to use the phrase child exploitative materials when you meant comic books? And I'd say, well, it's just an utterance. But I would. I'm
explaining what it, right.
Yeah, I'd really like to use the phrase child exploitative materials rather than comic books, because I feel like it has a little punch. It might get me across the finish line on my political goals. And that I'm being a little bit of a dick here, but that's the level of disingenuous he was being with.
That's exactly.
And this is why in an hour debate where I can't do what you did, it's not an option. I was like, how do I explain to the audience in a way that's going to resonate quickly what's really happening here? Right? Like, and the realization I came to is Pisco's trying to debate trap me with this nonsense fucking syllogism and his proprietary definitions, and I don't have to be trapped. I don't have to accept his trap. I can do something different. And I honestly, nothing could have vindicated that decision more than watching the fact that A, he is full of shit, but B, he's going to obfuscate to the point where it takes 11 hours to get to the fucking point.
By the way, it would have been longer, but once Avi left, he quickly rage quit because he couldn't go back to the person that was saving him the whole time. I'm going to play this clip. I thought this is one of the highlights. There's a million. And I don't, poor Black Elk, he could clip this for the next 5 years, I think. But all right, let me get this clip up.
Black Elk needs a raise.
He does. Get your super chats in, folks, so I could give Black Elk a raise. All right, here we go. What Democrats would do. They just hadn't had their chance yet. So Republicans were just preemptively. Secondly, I think
this
Republicans. Let me finish.
Many times, it's crazy.
Let me finish. Second, I think Republicans who are not currently packing the Supreme Court, who you have no proof that they would in the future, but you're like, well, maybe they would. That's my belief. I think the same is true of Democrats because Democrats are actually announcing it. And so, in order to deter that, I think Republicans should pack the court now. That would deter it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be justified in doing it.
Why not?
Because you don't have a justification for it.
Remember, Pisco will later say, when I say justify, I just mean it's good according to my preferences.
Yeah.
So he's saying you don't have a yes, I do. It's good according to my preferences.
Yeah, my preference is Republicans retain power and specifically screw you over Pisco.
Yeah.
That's my preference.
But it gets even better. Listen, I think that court packing is horrible. Do you agree? Premise one.
Unless it's a justified court packing.
Court packing in general is terrible.
All else equal, I agree it's bad.
Okay. Number two, it would be a huge positive thing that we should try to achieve to end all court packing.
Yeah, I think it would be hugely positive to end it.
Number three, Republicans packing the court now will lead to deterrence.
I don't necessarily agree with that now.
Why not? By the same rationale that Democrats packing the court will lead to deterrence, Republicans packing the court will lead to deterrence.
Well, I suppose to the extent that it's inducing the Democrats to do this, great big struggle for the Supreme Court, perhaps, but in general, it wouldn't be justified for the other reasons, right?
It doesn't matter. We're not talking about your syllogism. We're talking about mine. We're talking about mine. You already accepted premise one. You accepted premise two. Premise three. You have to admit, yes, it would deter court packing. Four. Therefore, Republicans should pack the court.
No, that doesn't follow.
Why not? You agreed to the syllogism. Valid. You just agreed.
It's not valid.
Why not? Premise one. Court packing bad. That we should reject, right?
So all else equal, as amended, right? All else equal, court packing bad.
Okay, Premise two. If Republicans pack the court now, it would deter court packing in the future and have a chance to end it.
In the way that we're describing, I might even grant that.
Okay, Premise three. It is a noble goal and something we should do to end court packing.
All else equal, again, in general, yes.
And therefore, conclusion, Republicans should pack the court.
It's invalid.
Why is it invalid?
I don't know what to tell you.
Why is it invalid?
Because the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises.
Why doesn't it? It absolutely, Avi, does the conclusion follow from the premises? Now, I could skip ahead. Avi gives his spiel, which unfortunately I was appealing to Avi, but it gets, not to belabor the point, but listen once it gets back to Pisco, why it's not the case. If it is a goal, something we should shoot for to deter court packing, and if Republicans packing the court now leads to ultimate deterrence, right? Therefore, Republicans should pack the court to lead to ultimate deterrence.
Yeah, but I'm just not gonna bite on some of the premises that are missing there, and
like what? Go ahead, give me an example. Give me an example.
Yeah. So one is an effective remedy that it might be done in such a way.
Again, just notice how this works. When Pisco creates a syllogism, if you want to say a premise is a problem, you got to spend 8 hours arguing about why the premise is a problem. When you construct a syllogism, he's like, "Oh, I don't accept that. You have to convince me." The burden of proof is on you to convince me of the premise. But when I assert a premise, the burden of proof is on you to disprove it.
We spent 3 hours on premise two. Yeah. On one of the premise two, we spent 3 hours.
Well, so, and look, again, I just want to make sure this point is clear. If this was a intellectual exercise and it was just like a dick measuring contest, and we're like, okay, who's smarter? Let's go out there and debate. You know, I wouldn't get so hot under the collar about it. But he's using this to propose the tyrannical imposition of power over me and my family, right? Like, this is like, it's a little bit, if someone's like, hey, I have this syllogism that proves that I think that God exists or God doesn't exist. And like, that's heavy stuff, but it's intellectual, and let's have a conversation about it, right? It's heavy, but at least it's intellectual. Pisco's like, I think I should get to control the lives of you and your family and do what I want to them. And I'm not kidding. I actually think the government should do this to you. Let's talk about my syllogism. It's like, get fucked, tyrant. Get fucked, tyrant. I'm
and
like,
and then as soon as the shoe's on the other foot, like even with setting this up, even with just being able to define words how he can, look how he stumbles in real time. Just watch this. I could not believe when this was happening. Listen.
And Republicans being as they are, that Democrats won't get the opportunity to respond in kind. And I do think that Republicans are capable of doing.
Now, do you hear that? The reason this would be bad was because this would lead to Republicans entrenching power, and Democrats would never get power. But Democrats wouldn't do that.
yeah, it would lead to Republicans doing the thing that he would like Democrats to do.
But he's like, but if Democrats do it, no. The Republicans could still have an option to get power eventually. But if Republicans do the exact same thing, it would be impossible for Democrats to get power. And my whole point is, leave him keep talking, because it's like, okay, all the arguments you made against my syllogism, guess what, Pisco? They apply against your syllogism. So watch what he does here.
That.
So same argument could be made about your syllogism.
Yeah,
so
no,
wait.
doesn't follow.
I promise. I'll shut up then. Every argument Pisco's about to make would be a defeater to his syllogism as well. Democrats could set it up in a way that Republicans would never get power. Why can Republicans do it but not Democrats? Go ahead, explain why.
Well, wait, hang on a second. That's nowhere in my argument or in your hypothetical argument.
You just said that a defeater to my syllogism.
You should prepare. So.
You
This is what you should do. Okay. This is what you should do. All right. You should take some time. You should take some time. You should take some time and think about it. And then write it out.
I am thinking
and we
about
can have
it.
this
Very
conversation.
simple. Two premises, conclusion. Your argument to those premises of, one, we should do everything we can, or it is a noble goal to try to end court picking. Why? Give me your reasons. Let's go through them one by one. Go ahead. Argument one. Go ahead.
Avi just told you the form of the argument is invalid.
It doesn't matter. Tell me why this is incorrect.
It matters. So I don't have to.
How is it? Without Avi, you tell me why it's invalid.
Because the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow from the.
Why doesn't it?
By definition.
Okay, you're acknowledging that we should try to
the truth table. There's at least one case where you could come up with a hypothetical case where all the premises are true and the conclusion doesn't follow.
Give me an example if you can come up with one.
It just does. It's invalid, Rob. I don't know what to tell you.
Wait. You just said you could come up with one example. Give it.
No. If you were to construct a truth table, you could do so.
Okay,
so,
give it to me.
So for example, the conclusion is something about they should do it, right? That's nowhere in one of the premises. That
sure,
term,
we
that they
should try to deter and end court packing. Yes, that's one of the premises.
Where?
Premise one.
Wait, no, we should deter, but it doesn't mean that Republicans should court pack. Do you understand that?
We should deter. Different. Do you accept the premise we should deter court packing?
In general, yes.
Do you accept the premise if Republicans pack the court, it will deter future court packing?
Yeah, all else again, that is going to be context dependent. I mean,
therefore, conclusion: Republicans should pack the court to deter court packing. I mean, and it goes on. Then I take his syllogism word for word, and instead of court packing, I put FISA abuse. His rationale to that is, well, technically it's valid, but I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean. By the way, on its face, the fact that he had to agree that the Republicans' court packing would deter court packing because he's defined deterrence in the most counterintuitive, nonsensical way possible, that actively engaging in the thing you are trying to deter as a matter of policy counts as deterrence. So, like, it's unbelievable that he's stuck in this corner but that's
I agree totally.
His definitions are that crazy. Like, I mean, Rob, I'm really worried. We got to deter jaywalking in my town, and that's why I'm saying jaywalking is perfectly legal, and in fact, we'll give you $10 if you do it. Wait, you might say, hell, that doesn't seem like it's going to deter jaywalking, Ryan. If you give him $10 for jaywalking, it's like, yeah, I'm hoping that in the long term, it has a counterintuitive effect, Rob.
And
That's
so
what I
many
mean by
people will
deterrence.
jaywalk that it'll become clustered, and so less people will jaywalk because it's inconvenient to jaywalk. See, deterrence. You can justify any, but the real point there, you could see, it illustrates many points. You make the most salient point. The truth is, when me and you were debating, we'll just say what we honestly believe, right? And then it's like, oh, if someone makes a point, it's like, aha, you didn't think of that. You're like, well, shit. What Pisco's doing is always trying to win the meta argument in the moment. Always. And he's not thinking, well, how does this apply to the grander scheme? But he has a clever trick to get out of it. Well, because I can subjectively define terms in any way I want. So even if the meta argument right now and what I'm arguing ends up biting me in the ass and somewhere else, I'll just say, now let me redefine that. I'll just redefine now and say, well, that redefinition exactly tailors in to, when I think that it proves something I want, it's good, but when you think something, it's bad. Literally, that's what he could do every single time. But even he slips up at times. So because he's making an argument that's on its face ridiculous, that court packing will deter court packing, he's then forced to, because he's like, of course that's the case, he's then forced to accept that that would be the case no matter who does it. And then once he acknowledges it's a noble goal that we ought do, he's just like, well, Avi, there's exceptions why this would apply. Give me one. Wow, I know there are. What you should go study more and come back with this. No, I'm fine to have the conversation now. It's pretty simple syllogism, right? And you can see just how flustered he was. And the best is when he's just like, it's invalid. Like, it's just, as you said, he's just repeating terms and shit. He has no fucking clue what he's talking about. Like the first year lawyer, he took Phil Bro 101 and he's throwing around these terms and he's asking his Phil Bro coach to bail him out. When in reality, I don't even give a fuck about the Phil Bro shit. I'm making
Rob,
a
look
point.
at my truth table.
Yes.
And then you said, show me the truth table. He's like, I don't know how to make a truth table, Rob. I know that it could be made.
It's like, when I'm like, okay, here's my FISA syllabus. I don't want to talk about it. I refuse. You see how it is? He has to control, right? You have to go, everything's proprietary, all of this shit. It is unbelievable just how, and for most people, I think what we're doing is we're debating like in a normative sense. So you're like, well, what really is injurious court packing? There's some sort of mutual goal we have of like a goal of fairness or just, not Pisco. All of it's arbitrary. And I'm not saying that I'm avoiding debates with Pisco in the future. I'm not. But I don't know what the utility is. Why doesn't everything, like go ahead, Ryan, I'll pretend you're Pisco. And you're like, all right, Rob, let's debate whether or not there's injurious partisan court packing. And I'm like, cheeseburger, telephone, computer.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, that's a brilliant argument. The way you've defined those terms.
Beard, shirt, t-shirt, your beard, t-shirt.
Based on the way Rob uses those words, that's a brilliant court packing argument. Now, you guys might not understand beard, neck, t-shirt, and to mean those things, but that's Rob just defines those utterances in a way that makes it brilliant. You might just not chat. You might not be following Rob's brilliance.
If each word is just an utterance that requires your proprietary definition, what is the explanation of the utterance composed of?
Yeah, well,
it's composed of words, right? Which are just utterances that need explanations of what they are, and those explanations will be comprised of words, which are just utterances that you'll need an explanation of what is. And you know what those explanations will be made of? Words, which are just utterances that you need. And so it's ad reductum, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, to put it in a practical sense, it's like this, like define cat. It's really hard. We could spend 5 days trying to nail down the exact, and we'll never get there, right? And it's like, at some point you have to be like, what is the practical application of this in real life, right? And if the reason I'm doing it is, all right, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to keep Ryan busy for 8 hours defining cat while my buddy Black Elk goes and robs his house. You might say, that's pretty shitty, Rob. That's what's in effect happening. We're doing all this fuck around. We're just defining words. We're obfuscating. It seems reasonable, blah, blah, blah. By the way, we want complete tyranny and control over your life and complete remake of all of the institutions of this country, separation of church and powers, perpetual power for Democrats. But don't worry about that because we're busy spending 8 hours giving you my proprietary definition of the word deterrence.
Well, A, there's that. B, the whole meta of this situation is now, I think, fully exposed, right? Like, I think everyone here has seen Pisco be hyper aggressive and shitty to people in debates, right? Like, I mean, can we be honest? That's basically his trademark. So I use his preferred tactic, turnabout's fair play, expose his tyranny, and I'm hyper aggressive to him in a debate. They spend all fucking weekend crying about it. People with, Josiah's got 100 times my subs. He's got 800,000 subs on YouTube. Spends all weekend crying about what I did, right? Then they go on Wick with Gen Z and Desert Druid, and they're just outrageously shitty. Way shittier than I was, even, because they don't really care about being shitty people. What they care about is that I did it to Pisco and he looked like a deer in the fucking headlights, and they didn't like the optics of it, right? Now Pisco goes on with you. You spend 11 hours of your time debunking his syllogism, which is, by the way, an absurd feat of endurance and generosity, right? Like
I am weird.
Like, I mean, who the fuck would even think that any human would do that? And what I'm warming up to is that Andrew Wilson's right. Andrew Wilson's right. Like, if you're talking to somebody who's going to make a moral argument and you detect that they're doing this sort of like subjective thing, then just skip ahead. Skip to the punchline and be like, define your terms. Is it preferences? Define your terms. Is it preference? Because it's always going to go there eventually, and it will save you 11 hours.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It took 11 hours to get there, and unfortunately, it didn't get any further than that. It's just, okay, these are bullshit propriety or definitions. And the last thing I'll say on this, I know I'm ranting, there's a philosopher named Stephen Hicks who hates postmodernism, and he has a lecture series about how to debate postmodernists. And this is his point ultimately. If they're talking about philosophy, they're talking about science, they're talking about art, they're talking about music, they don't care because they don't believe in truth. What they're really talking about is politics. They're always talking about politics. They're just talking about how to get what they want because they don't believe in truth. So what are we talking about? What are we moving towards in a dialectic if you don't believe that there's truth to find? Just getting to your preferences? That's the point of this exercise? Okay, well, if that's what we're talking about, I'll treat it accordingly. And I think you did a brilliant job, Rob. But holy shit, I would not have had 11 hours of patience in my heart for that conversation.
Well, I really wanted to. I love picking through that bullshit. And I've done this with Pisco before where I've debated him like 8-9 hours because it's this sort of thing. Because what he's used to is people just getting exacerbated or the clock running out. And so I'm like, I'll stay here all night, motherfucker. You'll rage quit before I do. So let's go through it. But it really did illustrate the point that you were trying to make, right? That in an hour, all it's going to do is run down these rabbit holes, He gives a syllogism and then says, I demand that you attack one of these. And he can't just say, yep, here's a clear definition. Notice how when he was interrogating my syllogism, I'd have like one or two words, yep, right? Things like that. Oh, no, it says that, like that. Not him. Well, it depends. We'd have to look if other things were equal. And so he makes it, like you said, impossible to have the conversation. He needs to do it, though, because you could see when it was more normative, he's getting blown the fuck out. Like, if you just go through it, premise one, which is basically all the other premises, which implies a should, you reject it because you're like, no, I don't think there's a universal truth that we could accept that thinks you should be allowed to go beyond reciprocity. Yeah. Well, we reject that. Give me the reason why that ought be the case. I don't think so. If I asked you all, right, if if Republicans gerrymander 5 seats, Democrats are justified in gerrymandering 200, you'd be like, probably not. Fairness would be they get a similar amount. So why can we go beyond that? Premise 2, there was injurious partisan Supreme Court packing. No, there wasn't, right? And if you do define Supreme Court packing in the way you are so loose, then it happened to Bork, it happened to Clarence Thomas, it happened to Kavanaugh. All of it would fit.
Oh, no. That's not my proprietary definition,
correct.
Rob.
My exact definition of it is Bork doesn't count, right? Okay, number 3, there's no effective reverse without court packing. I got him to admit that. I literally got him to, like, shamed him on every premise. No effective way to reverse it without court packing. I said, let me ask you this, Pisco. When the court packing happened, let's assume you had this syllogism, and then Democrats won. Not Trump, but Democrats win. Hillary wins, right? And which, by the way, Democrats assumed was going to occur.
They thought they were going to win.
Right.
Yeah.
What would that have solved the injury? Because now they wouldn't have even had to appoint someone who's more mediocre like Garland. They could have went with a Ketanji Brad Jackson, right?
Yeah, which is why Obama didn't withdraw the nomination. He was making a gamble.
He says, Pisco's like, let me think about it. Yeah, I guess that would have solved the injury. I'm like, okay, then the claim that there's no way to reverse it is bullshit. There was an immediate way to reverse it. There's literally thousands of things you could do. You could win this next election. in 2026. And then if there's a vacancy that comes up, you could reject Trump's. You could win in 2028. And all the vacancies that come up, you could appoint yourself, right? There's tons of things you could do. He needs to win that there is no other effective way. And what he says, even when I got to the point where it was like, there's a plane wreck. Now liberals have all 9 justices. Is that, would that effectively reverse the injury? He says no. They need more than all 9 justices. And I was like, but Pisco, if that's your definition, then there literally is no chance to ever reverse the injury. If even that won't, then what's the point? And I was like, if we go down that rabbit hole, then I could say it is impossible to reverse the injury of Bork. No matter what we ever do, even if you give us 9 justices on the Supreme Court, it still won't reverse the injury to Bork, to the time frame of all the decisions between when Bork was injured and now. Therefore, there will never be enough. So he loses that premise. The proposed reciprocal.
And Rob, okay. Can I interject and make one point that I think is really important here? Because I know that like Pisco wants, I guess he told you in the first part, he wants to do this technical premise, syllogism, debate style. This is far from my key point about him, but let's take that for granted. He has the affirmative position. That means he bears the burden of proof on every single premise. He has to prove every premise is true, not you. You don't have to prove it's false. He has to prove it's true. But the way he actually wants to debate is not in the technical style. He comes up and says, I have a valid syllogism. Which premise do you think is false? Right? They're all assumed to be true. It's up to you to disprove them. So wait a minute. Are we doing technical debate or no? Because on technical debate, if you advance a syllogism, you have the burden of proof on every single one of them. If you fight him to a draw, you win the tie. Now, you didn't fight him to a draw. You actually won on every point. But even his protestation that he wants to do technical debate is bullshit. He's lying. He doesn't want to do technical debate. He wants to use the aesthetic of technical debate to advance a political agenda. So fuck him.
Even like I didn't get to make this point at the end, but premise 5 I think is maybe the most laughable, which is there's no reason to expect a severe consequence cascade. I get him to admit, because at the end I'm like, okay, if the audience, because at the end of the day, once you get this reductive, how do we prove whether the syllogism is something that we ought to do the conclusion? And you want to know what the answer is going to be? We each make up our mind for ourselves, right? Right? So what we're appealing to is an audience. Pisco is trying to appeal to an audience. So I'm trying to set the stage. Okay, you're watching this. If you think premise 2 is false, you reject the conclusion. If you think premise 3 is false, you reject the conclusion. So I'm getting very literal. I say, if people think that it does overshoot beyond mild deterrence, they should reject this, right? Yeah, I guess. I say premise 5, there's no reason to expect severe consequence. If they think there will be severe consequences, they reject. And he's hemming on. I said, if Avi thinks that Republicans will pack the court, would he reject this? Pisco says yes. I said, if you think Republicans will pack the court, should you reject this? He says no. I say, what's the difference? Why is it if Avi thinks it versus if you do, one rejects and one doesn't? And then he says, well, because Avi's preferences would think court cause. I'm like, how do you know his preferences? You haven't asked him. He's like, okay. Because he doesn't believe, Pisco doesn't believe that Republicans packing the court are a severe consequence. Do you see the problem with that statement? His entire argument was they packed the court with Merrick Garland, which is a severe consequence. That's his entire argument. The entire reason for the fucking plan and the syllogism is because he says Republican court packing is a severe consequence. Then when I say your plan will lead to Republican court packing, he says, I don't think that would be a severe consequence. I mean, I don't know what to say other than, and it's impossible. That's a clear, easy point to make, except when every 3 words out of my mouth, he's going, no, that's equivocation, blah, blah, blah. And it takes 11 hours to get to places. You can see on every one of these premises, it's like, it's such a joke.
He admitted this in my debate with him. He admitted it on Wick's panel. He's admitted it multiple times. In a world where the Supreme, in fact, I gave him the quote from Brad Palumbo, which he said I misrepresented, and then he admitted it was true in your conversation and my debate and on Wick's panel. in a world where the parties take turns packing the court, and the court keeps growing larger and larger and larger, and the rule of law is impacted, however that is impacted by the growth of the court, which I think would be pretty negative, but we can set that aside for now. He thinks that is preferable to the status quo. Therefore, it's not a severe consequence cascade based on his preferences. But then he's making an ontological argument. His premise 5 is there won't be a serious consequence cascade, and he's defining serious consequence cascade in such a way that it can never happen. Because he said, well, I don't believe that's a serious consequence cascade, even though it is the thing that everyone worries about in terms of court packing. It's just a proprietary definition customized to his preferences that he admits even like Avi, his friend, wouldn't agree with. So, like, at the end of the day, just say, my preference is the Democrats pack the court, because that's all you're saying. You're saying it's my preference, and you're using a lot of fancy words around it.
That's like, and like, it's bad enough to take like a noun or a verb and have a proprietary definition. But like an adjective or an adverb, it's even worse, right? So like, what is court packing? And to have a proprietary definition, that's bad. Now, what if I said, what is mild court packing? Holy fuck. The gate's open. That could be anything. I could define court packing how I want, and I could define mild how I want. So I could say, what is a tall man? They even said this, by the way, at one point. It's on. Let me see. This actually, one of the commentators on my video said this. It's absolutely hilarious. Let's see. Thank you to Dat Snipper, who says this. There's so many clips I couldn't even count. Someone needs to count the number of times Pisco accidentally concedes the debate before redefining terms or contradicting himself. My personal favorite, Pisco, and this is not a verbatim quote, but close enough. Quote, the prompt is just utterances that convey an idea. So the words are meaningless until I define them in this debate. Therefore, premise 1, all dogs are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is a dog. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal, is a valid syllogism even if Socrates is not a dog, because a dog could just be defined to mean a man. He literally said that, right? 9 hours later, Pisco, the meanings of terms subjective? Nope. There are standard usages for terms, obviously. So he's literally telling me, I'm just arguing, is this a valid syllogism? I literally could define man means dog. But then later when I'm like, this is really bad, these are just total subjective terms. Clearly not. Clearly we have to have a universal understanding of what the terms are.
He appeals to objectivity when it suits him and not when it doesn't, right? Of course. And by the way, as a kind of meta critique, what the fuck is law if you don't believe that there's an objective meaning to reach towards? Like, you know what I mean? If like when I say like if you say it's unconstitutional to do something, isn't there some like enduring set objective meaning of the Constitution that we're appealing to? Because if all you're saying is I interpret the Constitution based on my preferences such that what you're doing is unconstitutional, I might ask, well, why do I care about that?
Well, I
disagree. Why do I care?
I didn't make a lot of hay with this, but one of the arguments I said is like, look, when the courts are deciding whether or not someone's guilty of a crime, they have a statute, right, that they're looking at, and it's defining terms. So did you commit insurrection? Pisco knows. He says, here is the standard legal definition. So you appeal to sort of an attempt at an objective definition when it comes to the concept of the law. Why should it be different when we're talking about the discussion we're having here? Now, look, it's again, like back to the example of the cat, or like there's all these things. You can constantly go one step further. Well, what's a cat? Well, a cat's an animal with 4 legs. I had a cat with 3 legs. Okay, a cat's an animal usually with 4 legs. It can have 3 legs at time to time. Okay, but I had one with 2. Okay, a cat's an animal with right, and you can just keep going. The genetic makeup of a cat is this, blah, blah, blah. You can keep going over and over and over. What is a chair? You can define it reductum, right? Millions upon millions of ways. The problem is, right, we understand that there's a collective meaning that makes like sort of communication in the first place intuitive. And without it, if we constantly define terms reductively like that, there is no possibility for communication. So when I see you and I say, hey, how was your night last night, Ryan? We have a 95% agreement implicitly with what those terms mean. However, it is technically true that those are social construct, those words, and that it's not an objective meaning because the meaning can be fluid from time to time, right? Because sometimes as society moves, linguistics tell you about this, as society It slightly changes the definition in small ways over hundreds of years.
Sure.
It can match. The problem is, what they do is they take the fact that it's subjective and say, therefore, there's no different than me and you arguing, like, is that a chair or not? To, I think that man means dog. It's the exact same thing. So I could say deterrence could mean the opposite of deterrence. Perfectly fine, because after all, it's all subjective.
Yeah,
That's the absurdity.
There's the difference between saying there's a real world out there, and what we're trying to do is come up with definitions that match the real world to the best extent we can. We understand it's never going to be perfect, but what we're trying to do with language is match it onto reality, versus saying, well, it's all subjective, so the words can be whatever we want, right? Like if you're not, to use Pisco's new favorite phrase, because he's now a 101 philosophy bro, if you're not indexing it to reality, then you're lost in private languages now. That's where you've ended up. And ultimately, he's doing all of this in service of just pure partisan politics, right? Like the most purely partisan, fuck the Republicans, I just want to punish them. That's his point. His point is, I just want to punish the Republicans.
Yeah.
Right? But it's ironic because, like him and Destiny with the Colorado Trump thing, where they tried to take Colorado tried to take Trump off the ballot. 9-0 Supreme Court, as I'm fond of reminding Destiny. They think the court was wrong. Well, how could the Supreme Court be wrong if it's a social construct? In our social construct, the Supreme Court are the people who get to decide what's constitutional. So if they all agree this is what it means, on a social basis, there's no basis for you to disagree. To disagree, you would have to disagree on a purely individual preference basis or by appealing to an objective standard, right? So it's objective when they feel like it. They're certainly not going to say, I think the Supreme Court's wrong because my preferences. They're going to appeal to an objective standard when they want to make a point about the Supreme Court being wrong. But when you try to pin them down on the definition of court packing, suddenly there's no actual meaning. Suddenly,
Correct.
It's objective when it suits them. It's subjective when it's not, which is a joke.
And I know enough about postmodernism. I remember learning about this a little in debate. I like a 3 out of 10 in understanding it. But the idea is, if there's no truth, then all conversations are just power dynamics.
Yep.
Even this conversation I'm having right now with you, there's no truth here. There's no actual attempt at mutual understanding. It's just me trying to get a leg up over you and you trying to get a leg up over me. That's it. And that's what all human interaction and communication is. If there's no truth, then there's no lie. There's no mistruth, right? There's no value to attempting to be something that doesn't exist, which is true. Everything's subjective. All moralities are subjective. So what are we left with? I could easily say, Ryan, let me borrow your car because I need to go get milk for my baby. And my intent could be to steal your car, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because all that matters is a power dynamic, and I got power of getting your car, which is good. That's it. That's all there is. And the person that stands up and says, but wait a minute, that will harm society. That person doesn't give a shit about society. That person, too, is attempting to have power. Anybody that objects. Right? And so what happens is you could blatantly lie and mislead people. In this debate, for example, and I brought this up, Pisco's he starts talking about political targeting, right? Of political investigations, right? Do I think the investigation into Comey's political? Yes. Do I think in the context of what Pisco, I think he means it's political? No. And that's because I think Pisco means that it is misconduct or illegal to investigate someone for political reasons. I disagree. I think that norm has been violated. I think as long as there is a legal threshold met, that there is a very low bar for starting investigation, I have no problem with that. That's my standard. It's not illegal. I don't like it. I would rather we never had gotten to this point, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Pisco thinks it's a sign of weakness for me when I admit, yeah, I guess the Comey thing's political. He says. I said, okay. Were any of the investigations into Trump political? Fannie Willis, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, Ejon Carroll? You know what he says? No.
Of course not.
And so because he is on his face laughably lying, he knows they're political. By political, he just means, was the fact that Trump was a former president and Republican, did that factor into his targeting? He absolutely knows it's true. They literally created laws to go after him. He absolutely knows that's true. And his argument, he'll look there with the straight face and lie to you and say no, and then say, see, that means I'm better than you. Because you admitted that Trump did something political, but I'll never admit it. I'll lie right to your fucking face.
I'll lie to your fucking face.
Therefore, I win. And that's all that matters to him. It doesn't matter that it's like, and this was way back when, the first time I did this whole thing, because Pisco was one of my favorite people to debate, right? And the black pill moment I had with Pisco, it's the dumbest thing. It was Jamal Bowman. Right? You remember he pulled the fire alarm?
Yeah, yeah.
Pisco's like on social media and he's shooting the shit with people that are like more left. And there are people trying to argue. He didn't know that the alarm would go off when he pulled it. And Pisco's like, oh, come on. He knew, right? Yeah. Okay, now table that for a second. We go over here and I'm talking to him and I'm like, this is bullshit. He knew what he was doing. He was trying to stop this, blah, blah, blah. We're having this conversation. And I'm like, there's a two-tier system because for me, this is obstructing of official proceeding. They went after January 6 people for this. Why won't they go after him? He's like, no. One of the things that Pisco talks about the importance of is lying to investigators materially into an investigation. That was why it was very important to go after Papadopoulos. It was why it was important to go after Flynn. It's very important. Okay, now we have the table set. The police interview gets released with Jamal Bowman. In the interview, they say, did you intend for an alarm to go off? Bowman says, no.
I just pulled it.
Now, Pisco already laughed and said that's bullshit to the people online. So I say, okay, Pisco, isn't lying to investigators really bad? Yeah. And it's something we should charge? Yeah. Okay, and you said that it would clearly be a lie if Bowman said that? Yeah. Okay, here's what Bowman said. So that's a lie, right? And you know what his response to me? I shit you not was. Well, I think when Bowman said he didn't intend for an alarm to go off, he meant he did intend for an alarm to go off. And I was like, what? What? And he's like, see, he mistook the question possibly of the alarm right above him. He intended it to go off, but when they asked him the question, he meant the alarms in the rest of the building. So he interpreted the question instead of, did you intend for an alarm to go off? He interpreted that as, did you intend for the alarms all through the building to go off? Which is why he answered no. And I was like, I don't know how I could have a conversation with you ever. If you're willing to lie, and then here's the best part. His explanation for this is, but why would I lie? This point means nothing. And I'm like, yes, that's what's so fucking frustrating. It would mean nothing for you to go, yeah, it looked like he lied. Well, anyways, January 6th was worse, you know.
And then they have the balls to be like, oh, Ryan was dishonest about his approach in that debate.
That's constantly what it's like. And I've noticed ever since then. And you can tell he's getting more Philbro. Now, I want to make a comment about the Philbros here for a minute.
Oh, but by the way, Rob, just so you know, I'm going to have to drop in 10. So we might want to do super chats just so that I can.
Yeah, let's do that. And then
get those in before I drop.
On your end, Brozufso.
Brozufso. Thanks. By the way, send Rob some money. He did a fucking 11-hour stream
thank you for the gifted sub.
Give Rob
then he sends me 5 gifted. That's 5 times more than me.
See, that's well, I mean, your debate was 11 times longer, so I feel like that's appropriate.
Then we have the exact same for Shopping Grow.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Gives me 5. Thank you so much.
All right, okay. Once was cool. Twice, I don't know about that. Now this is a disturbing
Ryan's
thing.
not paying the mortgage this month. Searsight, $5 says, good afternoon, Rob. Thank you, man. Birdie the dog, $10 says, thanks for the content, Rob. Of course.
Well deserved.
My pleasure. Lesson Self, $5 on your end says, could you tell Rob to get the mic a bit further away? He's breathing heavily and we hear a whistle. I know. My asthmatic cat. Listen, my new computer's supposed to be here next week, and I promise one of the things we're going to do when I get it set up is to get, I forget what they call it, but like the little filters and shit.
Oh,
on
the cover? Mic. Yeah.
So, Lone Wolf and Cub, $2 in your end says, Pisco, it's different when we do it.
We do it.
Yeah, that's it.
Capital D different.
Yeah. Lord of the Nerds, $5 in your end says, the ultimate debate cope is afterward. Demand that others must now debate you if you did good or bad. The bum's lost, Lebowski, get over. I have a story about that once Ryan leaves.
The very fact that they wanted to debate you about whether or not I whooped Pisco's ass is very good evidence that I whooped Pisco's ass. I agree.
Well, and I did mention I would be happy to debate you on this, which he did. And then he got pissy after it took 3 hours when I was like, look, this was a topic we didn't really care that much about, and we spent 3 hours. And he's like, oh, wait. Let's go. Here's what you said on X. And I was like, okay, let me read our DMs. When I said, I really don't care much about the first topic. Can we make sure that we spend at least an hour on the second one?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, you're accusing me of taking too much time on the first topic, so we didn't get to the second. I'm like, who the fuck said that? The accusation I was making wasn't that he was trying to not talk about the second topic. The accusation that I'm making, if I'm honest, is you're such a fucking blowhard, and it's like pulling teeth to take 2 inches with you, that it takes 3 hours to get through a topic you barely give a shit about. Because, like, you can't just, everything has to be proprietary definition. Like, just, it's fucking ridiculous. Constant interruption.
Meta, Rob. Meta. You're being meta,
It's
Rob.
meta. It's meta.
That's meta.
That's Sniper $5 says, I love the debate for reasons Ryan outlined. Words are attempts to define reality. Sadly, Pascal's an anti-realist. So that's not easy for words. Define, I didn't bother asking. What do they mean by anti-realist?
Yeah, so Pisco's a moral anti-realist. I don't know if he's a normative anti-realist. What that means is that he doesn't think that that morality actually exists, or that it's something that you can like objectively reach for. He thinks that all morality is stance dependent, meaning it's not like he wouldn't agree. Like, this is going to sound crazy, but he wouldn't agree with the statement slavery is bad. He would agree with the statement according to my preferences, slavery is bad. Right? It's bad because I don't like slavery. It's not bad because there's something about slavery that is intrinsically bad. Right? It's all about the stance, and stances are about preferences. So that's what he means.
So then again, I am not fucking trained in philosophy or any of that shit. And I'm going to talk about it once you leave about what I think about all this. But let me say this. If that's the case, intuitively, then what we're doing is we're saying this is my stance on this, and I hope to convince you it ought to be your stance as well. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Right? So I think slavery is bad because my stance, and I would like you to also share my preference, right? Fair enough. So then wouldn't intuitively part of me wondering whether or not I should, with my subjective preferences, accept your subjective preferences, is have insight as to the reason for your subjective preferences? Wouldn't that make sense?
Well, and the other thing that it would, and the other thing that would make sense is logic would take a backseat to rhetoric, because if my goal is to convince you to share my preferences, I should be indifferent as to whether I'm using logic or rhetoric or emotional blackmail or force, right? Like they're all tools to change your preferences. Why would I limit myself to logic, right? Given that we said that, when Pisco starts getting pissed off at you, saying rhetoric, when you're saying, no, it's not. What you're doing is as valid as what he's doing. He's saying, here's my subjective preference. I hope you agree with it. And you're saying, here's reasons that you should not accept his subjective preference because he has ill intent. Yeah.
He came to this conclusion because he has exhibited, he wants power. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, when he's telling you, I think you should be for packing the court, his motivation for why should matter. Given that he could lie, he could change words, whatever. So it is completely in bounds and not just rhetoric. There is no reason that that's not as valid of as an argument. That like Pisco's a bad faith hack who just wants power and wants all this other shit to occur. That is an equally valid argument as Pisco saying, I think that what happened to Merrick Garland was court packing. Because after all, they're both just speaking to his justifications for his semantic preference. That's it.
I mean, like, he would prefer that I debated differently. I would prefer that I didn't. And if I don't care about his preferences, which candidly I don't, why would they influence me? Right. Like, so there's a whole kettle of fish there. If you want to like understand where Pisco's coming from, I have a video on my channel. It wasn't a debate. It was a very friendly conversation, but I had a conversation with Lance Bush, who's he's the anti-realist philosopher that's like on YouTube, who's generating all the talking points that people like Pisco are using, because he's actually like an academic and this is his area. So Pisco's using this guy's architecture, right? And if you want to understand what Pisco means, that's the way to look at it. But also, I would understand if you didn't want that, because like, let's be real, you just had to deal with that shit for 11 hours. Maybe you could use a break.
I guess I'll just say this. For me, it's hard to codify this in words, but to me, it's irrelevant. It's like the question of free will being irrelevant, right? The positions of there are objective truths, right, that come from a true source of truth, like God or whatever, versus I'm an anti-realist, I guess. That everything stance dependent and I'm a subjective, like all of my shit's subjective. It's irrelevant because ultimately, when it comes to practical applications of interactions with other humans, both are trying to convince the other that there ought be some attentive collective belief in morality in the way that we operate our systems. I think it's because God orchestrated it. You think he thinks it's because so therefore it is implicit that things that we take for granted, like concepts of fairness, ought to continue to implicitly be things that we evaluate while we're normatively going through politics. It's not but incumbent to then say, no, I have a proprietary definition, but it's okay because everything stance dependent. Because I say the mere fact that we are attempting to appeal to things like fairness prove that we all understand that intuitively that's how the majority of people operate. And when the ultimate goal here is to try to get people on our side politically, I don't think I have to go down your fucking rabbit hole. I think it's sufficient to say, I'm convincing the people that your concept is full of shit and completely selfish. And the fact that you rely on this trick instead of just skipping ahead to, yes, we all have this framework that we're trying to engage within, I think sums it up.
Can I leave you with this? Because I do have to drop in a second. But if anti-realism was true, you would expect to see that anti-realists would be all over the political spectrum, right? There's nothing intrinsically on the surface left-leaning about anti-realism, but they're all leftists. All of them are leftists. And why is that? The reason is, if anti-realism is true, conservatism is probably false. Because conservatism is premised on there being an enduring moral order worth conserving. And if there's no enduring moral order, you're already at the point where conservatism basically doesn't make a lot of sense. So, the reason that you have anti-realists lining up on the left and that people find this so appealing on the left is that they're using philosophy as a collateral attack on conservatism in politics. That's what they're doing.
Yes.
And the philosophy is secondary for most of them to the collateral attack. Pisco, I'm going to say this just honest opinion, he doesn't give a fuck about the philosophy. He cares about the fact that he can use it for a political end. Right. And that being the case, I think, you take it with the seriousness it deserves.
Well, Ryan, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to stick around for a couple minutes here, but man, what are you up to this week? Anything?
I'm doing a debate on horseradish with your boy Speakeasy on Saturday, so that'll be fun. Oh, that's
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll convince him that juries are good things. So that'll be fun. And I think I'm going to moderate a word war debate next week. But I'm still
they did that. We're in the hat.
Yeah.
I knew they'd set up a panel, but I didn't know if they ever got around to.
Yeah, we're still working out the details. But Rob, I think between our two debates, yours doing literally 10 times more work than mine by at least by the hours count, I think we have put this issue to bed. I don't think any sane human could watch those two debates and not realize what's happening. So thank you very much. I appreciate you, buddy.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. We will talk to you soon, man. You have a good one.
All right. Bye, buddy.
See ya. All right. I do have some things to say before I leave. And then I have to do the extravaganza. And then I have a no prep debate later tonight. When do I sleep? That would be nice. Sleep would be nice. All right. About the Phil Bro stuff. Oh, by the way, let's see. I think this is something I might want to show. I could be wrong, but this is where at the end of the debate, Pisco just starts talking about his preferences. Now it's just a matter of preferences, I think.
When you answered a different question, a different answer to the justification question as it relates to the should question. That's what happened.
Even if that's the case, nonetheless, what you could see is it was clear that I thought this was more than just my preferences. I thought it was you speaking to some concept of fairness or something of that effect. When you just admit, let me finish, when you just admit it towards the end of this discussion, like, well, no, the fairness has very little to do with it. It's just my preference.
No,
that's it. I know. Justified just means I think it's good. That's it.
But nice
dog. Each word I'm using have any sort of connectivity to a mutual understanding.
It seems that we're, at least to some extent, operating with mutual intelligibility.
How do you know that?
It seems that you know.
You have no idea what each one of these words mean that I'm saying. You're just interpreting through utterances and sounds coming from my voice that you understand. Maybe I'm sitting here and in my own language, I'm saying, what the fuck is this moron doing? Why doesn't he shit? So I'm allowed to pick on your
you use proper.
I
at
agree.
Least sometimes loosely.
There is a requirement for communication of some sort of mutual understanding, even if on the fringes
that's intersubjective. That's intersubjective.
Listen, I don't care what term you use. Even if we might not be able to objectively define the word dog in the same way, we might have nuanced definitions. So you could say there's not one objective. We all have a collective idea of basically what we mean when we say the word dog. The same would be true when we're talking about whether someone should be justified in doing something. We have a mutual understanding of what justified would mean, which has to do with the concept of fairness, or else we ought to have that. And when it comes to fairness, we have a mutual understanding of basically what that ought to be. To say that terms like justified and fairness are completely subjective, and it's just if I think it's good based on my subjective values, goes out the scope. Just again, if I said all of these words are totally arbitrary now.
Yeah. So I just don't understand what you would mean by fairness, other than some kind of intersubjective, by which I mean like multiple people notice the fairness of like you mean by,
which is one that I've never heard. I will intuit it to mean sort of at least subjective. You think is the word. The idea of not only are you subjective when it comes to language fairness, you should. It has to mean more.
Like these are just conventions. They're so, but at the objective,
be just utterances that were unintelligible. Instead, you give away the game. When it comes to the English language, there's some sort of mutual understanding that we have. Yes, that's what I'm advocating for. You are correct.
Is that what you mean by objective?
Let me finish. So when it comes to objective, I don't know. What do you mean when I mean by objective? I've said it several times now. Let me see. He has, I'll clip this, by the way, where he admits that we've had of these terms. If you're using the term subjective here to mean it is not objective. So is the argument that if everyone else found that these premises were wrong, they should reject, but even if these premises are wrong, you won't reject? Is that your argument you're making?
No, I'm saying that some of these arguments depend on your stances, right? Your preferences. These are moral arguments about, as I understand them, preferences. Even if it's a preference for fairness, right? If you don't accept fairness as a norm.
Premise 5. If obvious that Republicans pack, here we go. Important to define this is you're saying premise 5. If Avi says, I do expect there will be severe consequence cascade, and he thinks that Republicans packing the port are severe consequences. You would say, yes, you ought to reject that, right?
Index to his preferences.
How do you know his preferences?
No, he would be elaborating them. He would be saying,
I think
your consequences. View that as a severe consequence. Anyways, I'll find the clips. We'll get them up. He does blatantly say that it's all subjective. I want to talk about the Phil Bros for a minute. Listen, I am friends with people that dabble in the Phil Bros stuff. That would include Andrew Wilson, Jim Bob, a bunch of other people that do that stuff. I don't do it. Not only do I not do it, I'm starting to think that to even attempt to dip your toe in it is counterintuitive to affecting real world change, because I find it so tedious and boring that you actually turn people off. There is a time and a place for it, don't get me wrong. But to reduce every single debate to define your morality, everything's subjective, therefore my subjective preferences, so any argument you make doesn't matter because I have subjective preferences and subjective interpretations of words, is boring. And I think that it harms your ability to convince average members of the public. That's what I think. I don't begrudge the people doing it. I just don't give a shit. I don't. It's like, sure, I guess it's something you could learn. I guess I could also, take grammar classes or vocab classes and get a more fluent vocabulary as well, I suppose. Ooh, this is important. Oh, piss. I just find it tedious. I don't think I'm particularly bad, at least compared to the average person. I think I proved that last night. But I want to make a bigger point, and this gets to a realm of sort of bitching about something that's borderline unethical. I'm just going to ask the audience some questions and just riff here. I extend the fact that I could be incorrect in my hypothesis here. But let me start. Do you think that Avi has talked to Pisco and tried to sort of train him in formal logic? Do you think that's occurred? I think it has. By the way, there's nothing on its face unethical about that, but do you think that's occurred? He may even admit it if I asked. Given that, me, being imminently good faith, was like, pick your moderator. And when he picks Avi, who's probably helped him at least with the framework for setting up his syllogisms, and then continues to appeal to the person that taught him how to do this, in effect his coach, to interject into the debate. What do you think of that? I think what happens is I think Avi and some other people are in this like Philbro group, and I think they reach out to people who are like, hey, can you help convince or train me to be Philbro to an extent? And I think they probably do that. And I think that it's probably bipartisan to an extent. They'll do some right winger or some left winger. I think Pisco's probably one of those people. I think Avi's probably one of the people that trained him. I think Avi then comes in, and Pisco's entire strategy was Philbro shit, with Philbro moderator to constantly ask Philbro moderator to interject. Now, this is no shame on Avi. He had no idea, like, he's just like, sure, why not? But why this specific moderator? Why do you think he did it? Now I'm going to break a rule of mine, and I'm going to talk about some direct messages. At one point in the debate last night, I said, ask yourself this. And Pisco's like, wait, ask yourself in the chat, bring him up. Anybody hear that? Remember that? I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Ask yourself? Well, it turns out that's the name of a person. Right? Pisco messages me today in a group message with ask yourself. And he's like, there's nothing shitty about that. I won't read the direct DMs, but I am going to talk about him. He's like, hey, just connecting you to maybe ask yourself can explain some things to you. I never said it. He made it up. Oh, okay. Whatever. What a generous offer of Pisco. He's going to connect me with this guy that's going to explain why what Pisco did was good. Very generous, Pisco. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Ask yourself, was like, hey, I'd be happy to explain to you why completely reasonable, a normal Philbro thing, when Pisco said, court packing, court schmacking, who cares? Just fine. I'm going to explain that to you. And I will use an exact quote here. I don't think this is disclosing anything crazy. He'll explain the schma move to me, its utility, and why objective, correct, etc. definitions are orthogonal to the moved prop. Well, that's nice. I accused Pisco of, your entire thing with Ryan was we should debate the pre-aforementioned plan that I outlined, and then immediately before I even get to speak on your plan in the second prompt, you change it. And I think you changed it because you knew if we accepted the premise on the words that are basically the universally accepted definitions, premise 2, that the Merrick Garland situation was court packing, is false. Therefore, the conclusion doesn't follow. Now, the Philbro, the defense of it's going to be this. Because these words are just utterances and we all have individual, after all, if there's no truth and everything's just preferences, we all have individual beliefs of what these words mean. So language could often be clunky. And so we're just clarifying. When I throw a word out there to you, I may change what seems to be changed the definition, but really that's just further explanation. So if I say, attack a schmack, oh, the reason I changed the word from attack to a schmack is I'm saying I don't mean attack as you probably mean it. That's just an utterance. Now, let me explain what I really mean by that. Now, what Ask Yourself's going to do is I'm going to explain to you how that's perfectly reasonable in the context of this. Yeah, I don't give a shit. I don't care that it's orthogonal. Anyways, he said he'd be happy to explain it. I just was like, nope, I'm good. And he kept insisting, why not? I'll help teach you. I'm good. He brings up Andrew. I've helped Andrew, he says. I'm good. No, thank you. Thanks for the offer. Not interested. He ends up calling me a coward, says he's going to put me on his dodging list, publicly tell people that I'm dodging him, and says the offer's open if I ever want to uncuck. Now, does this sound like someone who's like, hey, I'm just politely offering you some advice? Does this sound like that? Generous offer here that Pisco's pointed me to. A man calling me a cuck. No. I totally disagree, Shabby Girl. I will not benefit from a toolkit of assuming that these people are some sort of authority, that are obfuscators that are designed in order to hide truth. Fuck that. The idea that I have to look at these people as some sort of authority, the Philbros have a point in these formal syllogisms and shit. I disagree. I completely disagree. Fuck these people. I say that with all, maybe not fair. I don't mean that with Avi. I do not give a shit. Then I started to remember. I've actually had an interaction with Ask Yourself before. This interaction was some messages that we shared back and forth. And again, I won't read specific DMs or any shit. From July 26th, 2024. Now, here's what's occurring. This was right around the time. Well, that's fine, Shapping agree to disagree. Nope. Hey, Shapping how about all of them come and I'll teach them how to debate policy debate? And they all say, yes, sir. You know what you're talking about. You think they're going to do that? You say, that's like saying, I know how to use my hammer and chisel. I don't need a lathe or a mill. No, that's like going to the guy to teach you the lathe and the mill that you have to say, yes, sir, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was so wrong in that. Pisco actually won that argument. No, I refuse. Nor do I believe they know how to use the lathe and the mill. They merely know how to pretend to use the lathe of the mill so it looks like a reasonable facsimile to the people that are watching. So going to a charlatan that doesn't understand the lathe of the mill is irrelevant to me trying to understand the lathe of the mill. Also, the lathe of the mill does nothing productive whatsoever in society, so I'd be better ahead to keep using my hammer and chisel. That's my interpretation. Ought I also go learn how to shit talk from someone? Would that be good? Maybe I could talk to some battle rappers that could teach me the fine art of that. Oh, it's a tool you could use, Rob. No, thanks. No, I disagree. I think the toolkit is overused. Shabingro is a fan. He's a Ryan fan, yeah. He's a good dude. Ask yourself in July 2024 was reaching out to me because Avi had reached out to me at the behest of Pisco back in July 2024. The reason was this. Andrew Wilson just did the debate with Destiny about the legal definition of the term insurrection. Remember, Andrew didn't give a definition. He was basically like, your definition shit. So Avi wanted to set a debate up with me with Pisco where, and this is the Phil Bro shit, you ready? I could not contest the definition of insurrection. Pisco would give a definition of insurrection. I had to accept, for the purposes of this debate, this is how we will define insurrection. Now, I just got to debate whether or not January 6th meets that definition. So in other words, if Pisco stands up and says, my definition of insurrection is exactly what happened on January 6th, I don't get to say, that's a bad definition. I can only say, I accept that definition for the purpose of this debate. Then he goes, okay, given that, was January 6th an insurrection? I say, I suppose it was. Debate over. That's what they wanted me to do. And I had this entire exchange with this Ask Yourself guy one night about it. I've said things, I won't read his post, but I'll say some of mine. I debated Pisco on this exact topic. I gave my definition. There was no dispute of me being agnostic. Ask me to redo the debate, only this time I must concede that his definition of insurrection is correct as a precursor is nonsensical. If he wants to defend his definition in a debate about a left-wing event that could be an insurrection, I'm more than willing to concede using his definition for the purposes of that debate. Otherwise, any debate I have on the subject will include me disagreeing with definitions of insurrection that are so overly broad they include many left-wing riots that are never treated as such. And there was this big movement from Avi and Ask Yourself and Pisco to get me into this debate. Now, what do you think the intent was? What do you think the intent was of that? And even that, ask Andrew. I'm good. Ask Andrew. I'll tell you what the intent was. They wanted me to say, yeah, January 6th was an insurrection. That's right. Then you clip it and you put a little thumbnail. Conservative, MAGA's strongest conservative warrior admits January 6th insurrection. Would they accept the inverse? If I said, my definition of insurrection is the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that and only that's an insurrection. Okay, now that we've accepted that definition, was January 6th an insurrection, Pisco? No, January 6th was not an insurrection. There we go. Or do you think you'd be like, no, let me explain. Okay, according to the definition, maybe not, but here's the thing, blah, 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 blah. How do you think that would go? I'm like, what's the utility of me doing this? And they're like, because it looks like you're running. And I'm like, okay, so, I mean, think of this. If I'm like, I think that you're a child assaulter, and I define child assaulter as anyone who's ever talked to a child. Okay, well, you concede based on that definition, you're a child assaulter. Are they going to be like, yeah, but I don't agree? That's not the point of the debate, to say you don't agree. That's it. You don't get to disagree with the definition. You agreed to come in and debate saying that you wouldn't challenge the definition. So that's it. So what do we got? 2 hours? How many times would you say you've assaulted children, given my definition? Go ahead. We'll give you, no, just how many times have you assaulted children? Go ahead. We'll just do 2 hours of this. I'm recording. It'll be a lot of fun. Now that was Ask Yourself and Avi, which I don't think Avi's doing anything unethical here. Don't get me wrong. I disagree, Railston Mayershire. Totally disagree. Let me ask you a question, Railston. How did I do in the debate last night? Well, someone was attempting to use those tools, and I absolutely fucking crushed them. So I don't think I need to go learn more about those tools. People are using shitpost. I got to go learn the shitpost tools, right? But it's very funny that, like, this Ask Yourself guy, he's the one I don't even, like, I think it's a bit humorous that Avi's probably helped train Pisco, and then Pisco wanted him as the moderator, and then he kept appealing to Avi during the debate. I find that humorous. But this Ask Yourself character, I don't want your fucking philosopher help, so you're going to be like, okay, cuck, you're running. You didn't even say it was a debate. You offered to help me. I said no. How the fuck is that running? It's almost like you weren't trying to help me. You were trying to argue that something I said was wrong. Anyways. I think the Phil Bro stuff is reductive and not practical. Railston, agree to disagree. I just don't give a shit. Learning French could be utilized in a good way too. I don't take the time to learn French. I just don't care. If I could be quite honest, I think that so many people, including fans, put so much emphasis on this Philbro shit, which is almost 100% worthless when it comes to real world application. It is almost, in fact, it is antithetical. It tends to make you less persuasive in real world application. Hey guys, want to come over for beers? I'm putting up a new shed. What is your premises for putting up the shed? Have you thought of the philosophical implications? How do you define the word shed? When you say, do you want to help? What do you mean by that? You said, do you want to come over for beers? Can you define what come over means? What are beers when you talk about that? Will the beers be something that's consumed? Or are these some sort of things that you'll lend to us or that we could have? Yeah, people are going to be like, all right, Philbro, man, go fuck yourself. We're taking you off the chat list. Anyways, to the rest of you, want to come over for beers and help put up the shed? I'm sorry, it's everywhere. And I see I see it overused even on people on my side of things. The United States should pull out of Iran. Where do you get your truth from? Where's that come from? Where do we get the truth? Yeah, all right, man. I'm saying there's a time and a place for that argument. I find it irrelevant in this conversation. There's times for it. It's just, I did see Spencer violate TOS. Do I think Andrew's force doctrine is not persuasive? Yes, I think ultimately it could be non-persuasive many times. Ultimately. Yeah. I ultimately do. I think that it could be overutilized, particularly by people that are Andrew all the time. You can apply it to everything. Why have a conversation about anything? My force doctrine. Should we vote Republicans? Force doctrine. Okay. Should I have a hamburger for dinner tonight? Force doctrine. Force doctrine. All it's doing is describing a reality. That's all it's doing. Okay? What's that have to do with what we ought to do or what we should do? But people use the claim force doctrine all the time to try to make prescriptions of that. That's not what's going on. Should we vote Republicans? Well, Rob, force doctrine. People only have rights because people with force allow them to have those rights and enforce the structures to allow it. Great. Should we vote Republican? How persuasive do you think it would be? I'm doing a rally with a bunch of independents trying to suggest them to vote for Republicans. All right, so let me tell you about force doctrine. And be like, what? Huh? That's the way it is. Okay. You going to get around to saying why we ought vote Republican, or are you just describing your interpretation of force? That's why I say I debate vastly different than Andrew. Vastly different. I don't do that. That's not to say Andrew's wrong and there's not a time and a place, but it is so overutilized and it has minimal effect in creating real world political change. In fact, it almost has the inverse effect. The more you go down I don't know what to say. If you guys disagree with me, by all means, I'll invite you up here. We'll go to the local bar and you guys start Philbroing and see how persuasive you look to these people. They're going to be like, well, let me start by saying utterances are mere noises and we could go ahead and change. And they're going to be like, go fuck yourself. All right. I got to go. Anyways, it's been a lot of fun. Did I miss any super chats? I did. Lone Wolf and Cub, $2 says Pisco, but Rob, Republicans are evil and savage. Yes. Matt Flynn, member for 2 months, says I was there last night and I'm here for this, not one step back. Thank you. Shapping Grow, 2 gifted memberships. Thank you. Zach Gelpy, $10 says, what's unethical if he is a conservative? Why would he help a lefty? Get better at the bait. Doesn't make sense. Either you was lying or you were saying you voted for Trump or he's a traitor. Yep. And Gavin Freedom, $5 says, here's what I don't want you to do, Rob. So. Yeah. By the way, do you think Pisco learning Philbro stuff has helped him? Do you think that helped him? Those that are saying it's important to learn this stuff? You think that's helped him? Just curious. You think he sounded better last night than like we used to have actual conversations? Thank you for the gifted sub. You think that's helped? So it almost seems like just dipping your toe and learning the tools could really be of your detriment. That's what it looks like. That's right. It made it more confusing and less persuasive to the average person. So, all right. Anyways, fun debate. 9 o'clock tonight. Wrongful Lee, thanks for the $5. Says there's a time and a place for arguments. Pisco's the definition of bad faith and proprietary definitions during debates. Keep it up, Rob. Thank you. The lays and mills can be more dangerous. That's right. Anyways, I appreciate those of you saying that I should do this. I just like imagine sitting through an 11-hour debate of someone employing the most fucking absurd reductive tactics that you've ever heard and be like, hey, Rob, you should find people like the guys that trained him and train you to do that. But you could do it better. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't find it persuasive. Trust me, though, some people could do it well. I'm good. Thanks, so. 5:30 extravaganza. Meet Jake Rattlesnake. 9 o'clock tonight. We have no prep debate. All right, I'm out. Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon. As always, have a good one. Sorry, I thought it.